see myself. This is strange because I've done a lot of Zoom, obviously, during the COVID-19. Obviously, well, I have. And I'm used to seeing all the people. So I imagined that I'd be seeing people who I was talking to. And I'm not. All I'm seeing is myself on a computer. And I usually stand up and walk around, and I'm sitting down looking at a computer in my daughter's bedroom and talking in the hopes that somebody might be listening or will listen later. And that's okay, because I think it's quite good for me to talk to myself, because I probably need to hear as much as anybody else what I'm hopefully going to say. There's so much that's come up with the COVID-19, obviously, and we're going to all be picking over it for a long time and trying to learn from it. But the thing that has struck me is, you know, as someone who's been involved in climate change campaigning and other issues, I've kind of been expecting an emergency and thinking about what it would be like to live in a social emergency for some time, because I think it's inevitable that we will have emergencies, because I think our society in its current form has reached its limits and is coming up against them and is going to have quite a few crises. So I've kind of had this theoretical idea about what an emergency would be like, and then we were in one. And it's the first one I've experienced ever of that scale. And I know that some people in parts of the world experience terrible emergencies, but you know, this was a global emergency. It was kind of universal for everyone. And that was what's so kind of interesting and significant about COVID, is the way that it was equally applied to everyone, which probably made it easier for us to see that amazing, obvious human solidarity that we've seen across everything else. And certainly in the first few weeks I felt it of lockdown here in Britain, was that sense of solidarity, was a basic human kindness and caring. Partly it's pragmatic. It's like, if I care for you, you'll care for me, we all care for each other. But it was really fundamental, and I loved that. I loved that people cared. And I think we've all noticed and seen the voluntary stuff that's gone on, or that was wanted to go on, even if it wasn't able to. And so we've seen that side. But we also saw the beginnings of, we've seen divisions over stuff. And as time's gone on, the divisions have become more obvious and more difficult. And that's partly because of the structure of the society we live in, first of all. It's a top-down management. It's a society structured to make money and make profit, and therefore it's not been ideally shaped to deal with this. And other societies where they've kind of got more of a command economy, or more of a social solidarity between them, more collectivist maybe, they've been able to respond quicker and better, undoubtedly. And the countries which are most kind of barefaced capitalism, like America, have probably responded the most poorly of all. And that's because they're organized on a different principle, and the people running them haven't got it in their minds. You know, our government wasn't expecting this, and in fact, they got rid of a pandemic committee. They weren't prepared for this. They did the best they could. And we can all criticize and so on, but that's not what I want to talk about. So we had an emergency. We're in a society that can't really cope with it, and we're doing the best we can. But the divisions immediately come up, because although we say we're all in it together, we're obviously not all in it together. Obviously there's inequalities. And what interests me is that in an emergency, we can try and act together, but other things are undermining that. And these are the systemic things that we've all grown up with. And the basic ones, the obvious big fault lines in our society, are the class division, the inequalities of class, inequalities of access to power, to resources, everything. That's affected people a lot. And you can see that in the little fault line, little fracture coming off between the people who are in lockdown with gardens and the people in lockdown in very restricted accommodation. That immediately, and that isn't completely class, it's also a rural and urban divide, but it's a division, definitely a class division, majorly. People who've got nice gardens, people who haven't, you know. That's part of it. And obviously, as I say, that is rural and urban. Then you've seen You see the race divisions. I mean, that's obviously a huge race and ethnic divisions, and the male-female divisions. The major fault lines in our society are going to come up in any crisis. And the reason and the point about them is they get exploited by the people who want to exploit them. So it's really clear to most people now who think about it, that there are elements who now exploit our main method of communication, which is this digital one. And they can feed stuff into the cracks, a bit like when what a fracker does is feed fluid into the fracking cracks to force the land open. They feed their poison into the cracks which already exist, and those cracks can get worse. And I've been really struck that that is a major problem for us, and we have to take it seriously. We need to take this time now to reflect on what we've learned and what we need to do in order to make sure that the next big emergency that hits us, because there's going to be some, and they may be actually worse and harder to handle, that we're in better shape, or that we've preempted these problems that we can see through the COVID experience. It's not just that those major divisions exist actually, and that we have to work to overcome them. It's the way that all these little unexpected fractures come off. So COVID had its own very particular stuff, didn't it? So I had friends who I never knew that I was going to be like this with them because of their attitude to the virus. Suddenly, I had friends who I agree with on lots of stuff, and they may be watching this, and they had a completely different attitude. The virus wasn't real, or the cures, there were cures, or it was all a plot. And a lot of that, and we've all seen it. And some people watching this will think some of those things. So I'm not criticizing those ideas. I don't want to go into that right now, because that's not, we've been doing that with each other. We've been fighting over the ideas. Just that we need to find a way that doesn't completely subvert our efforts to act in a united way in the face of a crisis. Because if we think it's bad when there's a virus, imagine if there's a massive food shortage. And this is going to happen at some point in our lives. We're going to face food shortages, unfortunately, because of what's happening to the ecology. So if we're facing food shortages, then the feelings that come up and the divisions and our susceptibility to those divisions is going to be really keen. So I see it that we're in a society where we have been divided against each other. And I think these are habits we've learned from a very early age anyway. We've been atomized, we've been separated up because we have all these rival little interests, running. And our society works on division because division is how you multiply exploitation and you minimize unity of the people you're trying to exploit. And it's also how you create endless markets according to different identities and different opinions. So capitalism inevitably breeds those divisions, even though it tries not to. The people who run it don't want that. They're nice people, but they can't do any other than they do if they're trying to run the system. So those divisions are there. And then we have other divisions which arise, specific ones in the emergencies we're in. And the question for us is, what can we do to get around those? And I think the first thing is to try and find the basis of solidarity to get ourselves out of this. And there's lots of ways that we can find a basis for solidarity, but I want to look in particular at these things that came up during COVID-19. I mean, there were some different theories about what was happening, but there was also some really bizarre ones, which are definitely created. There are people who sit in places and create memes and put them out and see if they run. And it's been very painful for me to see some friends picking up stuff that's really coming out of very dark places. Places like the QAnon network in America, which feeds basically neo-fascist type thinking and bizarre ideas about what's happening in the world. And so one of the ideas that came out was really interesting. A friend told me the other day was that the reason for the lockdown was so that they could change the batteries in the birds because the birds are watching us. Now that's really bizarre, and I don't know anyone who believed that, but it ran apparently. And it will have, it's really interesting because I could see someone writing that, putting it out and just having a laugh and seeing, oh, by lunchtime, look, 1 million people agreed with that. So, and I think that's really interesting because it's obviously crazy, but do I want to tell people that it's crazy, or do I want to look at what it's really telling me? Why are people willing to believe that? And so what I've come to is when somebody comes at me with something that seems like a really weird theory, it's like, what are they really telling me with that? If somebody tells me that they don't believe in lockdown, and it's hard for us now, the jury's out, was it right or wrong? We don't know, do we? But if somebody tells me the lockdown, if somebody was saying early on that lockdown was a plan to lock us in and bring in a police state and bring in 5G surveillance and so on, and compulsory vaccination, I either just think they're crazy, or I think about what it is that they're telling me behind that. And what they're telling me is that they're finding lockdown unbearable and they're a bit scared by it. And the fact that people could believe that birds were having their batteries changed for surveillance purposes during lockdown, that tells me that actually we may have something in common, which is they don't trust authority. They don't like the fact that they feel like they're under surveillance. They live in a high technology world where they're so out of touch that they think birds might be battery driven things. So it's a symptom of modern living. And they basically feel like they're in a world that's beyond their control, where things are going on that they can't control. And that truth applies to all of us. There's a truth in all these conspiracy theories, which is that we're in a world we don't feel like we control. There are things going on which we're not told. It isn't transparent. There are people who consider themselves better than us who are running things. You know, this is true. And the awful thing is, like, it came into play during COVID was, well, Bill Gates, yeah, I don't agree with big pharma. I don't agree with personally with big philanthropist billionaires who made their money in computers deciding how those resources are going to be deployed according to their opinions, high tech opinions, which I don't necessarily think are the best solutions. But I do think that the World Health Organization is a good thing. I do think that a vaccination might be the best thing. I'm not sure yet, you know. So it's like, I don't want to make out that bad things are worse than they are. I don't want to buy into those conspiracies, but I do want to acknowledge that we live in an unfair world and we are manipulated. So I have a common ground there with people. And I need to find a way that I don't get into an us and them with them. And so I've been thinking about this as like we're in a minefield. It's like we've woken up in a minefield in a fog. And if we just go for the people who are like us and then laugh and unfriend or gang up or get really upset about the people who aren't like us, then if that's all we do, oh, my battery's saying it's low and I can't see the plug. If that's all we do, then we're not going to get through this. We have to find a way that we can deal with this kind of the effect of this disinformation and stuff upon us. And I think that it therefore comes down to me in that situation not to step into that pattern, because I think it's hard for us if we think that we're the good guys in any particular debate. It's really hard for us to not think we're better than the person we're discussing with. And two things strike me about that. The first is we might not be the right person. It's just possible. Now, I think there's a whole load of things which I'm right on. I'm very clear. Racism is wrong. Black Lives Matter. This is really clear to me. I'm not going to give it up. Okay. So if someone disagrees with me, I'm going to have a debate with them. But I don't need to think I'm better than them because in that area, I think better, or I haven't been hurt in such a way that I've become a racist. Because I think when somebody has an opinion like that, it's because of something that's happened in their life or some way that they haven't received the right information. Otherwise, why am I like this and them like them? There's no reason. Anyone watching this, there's no reason for you to think that you're better than anyone else watching this. It can't be true. You're not better. You were born like a little baby and you grew up. And you grew up in different parts of the world, in different class, different sex, different ethnicity. And then you had a whole load of different experiences yourself. And that's put you where you are. But it would be absurd for me to think that I'm better than them. But always, that's the first thing that's coming in, to be honest. I'm like, oh, you twat. I can't believe you're such an idiot. I'm thinking that, right? And I want to write it to someone, you know, and so I don't. But then I can quite easily go into another thing, which is I kind of patronize them. I'm kind of like, I show them that I know that they're wrong, but I'm interested why you'd have such a stupid idea. I don't know if you've noticed yourself doing that. That's one of the things I see people doing a lot. It's like instantly I'm telling the other person, I don't actually want to talk to you. I don't actually want to take you seriously. And what I realized is that one of the things I think is I'm really keen on, and it's my mission, and since we're all online at the moment, and online is where we're doing stuff, this is where I think we really need to practice, because whether we like it or not, this is kind of our modern book, isn't it? This is where we are meeting, we are affecting each other in a big way. So we have to start practicing and modeling treating people as if they're intelligent people who may have bad information or ideas, but that they are not stupid. And I think this is really hard. I've got friends who find this really hard, and I found it so challenging in this time not to unfriend people. I found it really hard. But then I thought, no, keep them, because I need to keep hearing what they're saying. And sometimes they're people who, on other things, they're like my ally. And we have something to learn here about solidarity, from the experience of solidarity in history. You know, we have to find a way to be together in this society that means that we can trust each other enough that we're not going to get on different sides in a civil war. Because in emergencies, those things happen. They really do happen. And COVID's shown us that we're not immune, even in this comfortable place. And in other parts of the world, in Europe, in Bosnia, within our lifetimes, this happened. Neighbor against neighbor. This can happen. So we have to find the way that we're really showing something different. We're building that network of friendship and trust. And, you know, it's like going to work. If you go to work, you might be working alongside someone who's a bit of a racist. I had that experience early on in life when racism was much more people said racist stuff and they didn't get pulled up. And I'd have it at work, you know, someone would be teasing me. He did it to wind me up. And he'd say really horrible National Front type stuff. But then we'd be on industrial action together and we were united. And that was more important to us because we had a common cause. And the common cause, which was our interest as employees, that took over, you know. Solidarity, as working class people historically have built it, is the key to how we get through these times. And that's why that is such an important thing. But we live in a time where it's much harder. It's not so obvious. It's no accident that the places where solidarity in the workforce is almost unbreakable in the past has been in the most dangerous jobs. Firefighters, miners, seamen, policemen and servicemen and women, they have it too. Because you completely rely on each other. And it's hard for us as, I'm guessing, I don't know, but I think a lot of us would probably say, it's fair to say, I mean, I've got a working class job, but I'm a sort of middle class person in a way. I've got middle class outlooks. It's hard for us in our sort of more atomized world to have that solidarity, which is right, we're all standing together because we're up against it. But the truth is, we are up against it. It's just harder to see, isn't it? Like the virus, it's invisible, but we're going to be up against it. And we have to find a way to create that solidarity. So we've had some brilliant talks already, and Pete McFadden was talking about them, about the kind of stuff that people do at a community level to make networks of, you know, resilience, which is what we have to do, create those resilient networks at a local level. But we also have to create that kind of sense of resilience, of connection between people in different social groups. And that's where these problems are potentially going to arise. People with different interests who don't feel their interests are being taken care of. And that's what I see in this disinformation stuff. It was okay that it was right that we cared about the vulnerable people and that we made sure that we all went into lockdown and distanced because of them. But inevitably, perhaps within that, we didn't think well about the people for whom that was going to be a major, major problem. Women who were stuck at home with abusive partners. People who had different kinds of mental health issues, which meant that isolation was intolerable. People who have had trauma and abuse in their childhoods, for whom isolation and not knowing what's going on and lack of human contact is absolutely intolerable. And when people went on about people going off to the beach and people going to the park, you know, I felt like, that's not right. It's not right. Actually, I understand why. I'm not blaming anyone. People say, oh, look at all these idiots. They're not idiots. They're people whose need to get out and to connect with other people was really great. That's what they are. And they're people who can look at information a different way, some of them, and say, yeah, I'm not sure about the lockdown. Look at Sweden, whatever. There's a load of that going around. We don't know. Let's be honest, none of us really know, do we? We go by our best guess, but we don't. We look at the information, we have biases, but we don't really know in an emergency. It's very hard to know what the accurate information is, and we're going to base it really on who we trust and what our friends are doing. You know, that's kind of got to be the key for most human beings. It always has been. But we don't need to, we need to listen, we need to see what that is that's going on for people and think, well, what needs aren't being met there? So if people are shut up in urban situations, why couldn't we have staggered periods of time when people could really go out and have time out? Why couldn't we do that? There wasn't that kind of thinking at that local, I mean, we know that, and that's the other side of it. We need to come out of this and make sure that we have lot more empowerment at not just councils, but in our own networks. We've got to build those networks ourselves. The government's not going to do it. The government's not going to even empower us to do it during a crisis. They're going to think they can do it from the top down, and we know that isn't the right way. It's obvious that more resilient horizontal networks are the way to deal with emergencies. But we ourselves need to do that work, because we are going into more existential crises, me and you. And they could be a lot uglier. What shocked me was seeing that this kind of the beginnings, and I don't want to exaggerate, because I think that's one of the things we do that is one of the ways we maintain these divisions, is that we exaggerate stuff. We say fascism's rising. It's not fascism. It's bad cop behavior, say. Cops have behaved badly all my life on occasion, especially when they've been dealing with working class people or people of color. That's happened all my life. And it wasn't fascism. It's the way the cops have behaved, right? Fascism's different. But we've seen the beginnings of the rising of those poisonous real divisions, the appearance of armed groups in America. Just the beginnings, but we see it. And so we know that this can be much more serious. So we have to do the work now to prevent ourselves. It'll be too late. When the food's short, it's too late to plan a local food supply. When we get into a situation of breakdown, it's too late to form those bonds. So I just want us to think about what we do to create that unity rather than create disunity. And the way we do that is take responsibility for it ourselves. You don't have to. It's fine to let off steam, but I decided I need to. I'm going to try. I'm going to make mistakes, but I'm going to try. And I know that lots of other people want to do that too. Which is, so when I think something's wrong, I show someone where I think the information may be wrong, or I inquire in a friendly way, not in a way that implies that I think they're a twat, but I inquire in a friendly way why they might think that, even with some really nasty stuff, even with racist stuff. Second, I'm really aware of my position, of my kind of class I've got a mixed heritage, but I kind of got some benefit of certain kind of education. I think of myself in a certain way and all the rest of it. I notice that people quite often pull people up for spelling mistakes. You've probably done it. You laugh, you see some guys marching for Britain First or something, and you laugh at the placard. I actually think I think that's appalling. Do you know? I really don't want to do that. I think that's a middle class thing. That is exactly the kind of thing that can make people who haven't had such a brilliant experience with that side of education, it can make them feel like the world is run by people who think they're better than them and who think they're special. And the funny thing is, you know, I had a brilliant one once with somebody who was like, everyone started to lay into him for being a racist because he couldn't spell. They were having a go at him. And I defended him. And then he wound back on his racism because he had dyslexia and he just wanted someone to acknowledge that they cared about him. And he was actually a mechanic. And if I need my car mended, I need the mechanic. And if I go to the mechanic and he says, oh, you're the guy who thinks I'm a racist Brexiteer, you know, I'm not going to get my car mended, am I? It's not going to be any good in an emergency. I need to find a way to remember that each person I'm dealing with is just a person, and that this stuff that comes out is just a bit of them, and that it's up to me as a friend to help them with that, not to tell them that they're shite. Somebody said to me something really interesting during one of these teleconferences, and it was in relation to what happened in America. And it was for all of us, each of us, to think about who's got their knee on our neck and whose neck have we got our knee on. Where are we in this chain of relationships where one has more power or is better than the other? And we've all got places where somebody has their knee on our neck symbolically, and other places where we have it on others. And there's no blame in this. But in order to not blame ourselves, we also need to not blame others. We need to make this across the board. People are going to be able to accuse you of hypocrisy. You know, oh, how did you get to your fossil fuel protest? I bet you drove. That's just like, that's old hat, isn't it? This is what happens. We can all be attacked for the things that we do as part of this society, which are in a exploitive relationship. I was thinking the other day about how the Lancashire cotton workers did such great work to stop the slave trade in the 1800s. You know, we always talk about Wilberforce, but actually it was the mill workers as well. And the funny thing is, those mill workers, you know, they were behaving with, that's classic, isn't it? That's class solidarity. It's against racism. It's fantastic. It's the best. But they probably, if they were lucky, they were going home and they were having a cup of tea. And that tea was their imperialist heritage. And then they were having sugar in the tea. And the sugar came from the sugar plantations of Cuba, which were worked by slaves. So there's no way that anyone is able to get themselves out of that, except by working together to transform society, either by our own efforts or because of an emergency. We emerge from an emergency with something better that we've formed. But we have to acknowledge that and not attack other people for it. You know, just do it on a case by case. It's a bit like when you're having an argument with your partner. You know, they say the way to deal with an argument, you don't bring up other stuff. It's not okay. If somebody's saying you didn't do the washing up, you don't say, yeah, but last week you blah, blah, blah. We all know that doesn't lead anywhere, does it? You know, you've got to deal with each thing on its own merits. But the thing I most wanted to say, really, I've kind of gone all around, but what I wanted to say was, where do you think you're better than somebody? And where do you think you're less than somebody? And not to put that out into the world, just to find that work, talk to friends about that, but not to put it out on other people. Not to, I think it's very hard at the moment. I mean, I'd like to discuss this. It's happened around the Black Lives Matter and stuff, because a lot of people's racism is becoming apparent, isn't it? Some people haven't looked at their racism at all, and they can't even uncomfortably look at it. They just don't want to look at it. So they're coming up with all kinds of counter things, irrelevancies and stuff. And some of them are even going standing in front of cenotaphs. But I'm really looking out now for a way that we don't even begin to condemn those people. We just say, how do I get to know those people? How do I become friends with those people? And we look at the thing in ourselves that is stopping us from doing that. We've spent so much, all my life, I've been involved in movements ever since my teens to try and change things, to end racism, sexism, homophobia, get working class power, get a more socialist society, end capitalism for good, stop the destruction of the environment. We've worked brilliantly, brilliant information, loads of experience, but we still can't do it. And the reason we haven't been able to do it is because we can't get over this first fundamental thing, that we divide ourselves from other people and that we think we're better. Working class people in struggle think they're better than the middle class people. They're not. They're just different. Middle class people have strengths and weaknesses, which they should add their strengths to the working class, you know, and let the working class lead them on their weaknesses. And that's true even of the owning class, even of the people like Boris Johnson's class. You know, they've ended up there for a reason. The reason they couldn't manage this crisis, the reason that Cummings can believe in herd immunity without thinking about it, the reason that he can think it's one rule for him and one rule for the others, is because of his class. It's because of his upbringing. He didn't start out that way, you know. So I'm not saying you should just be soft, not at all. I think you have to be absolutely clear about where you stand and resolute about it, but treat the people who don't get that as potential friends. Always to try and remember that the reason we want to change things is because we believe in humanity, and that means that my enemy is also a human being, and that probably with the internet stuff, they're not even my enemy. They're just, this is just something they're saying. So often, if you don't get into it, if you just politely or in a nice, in a friendly way, inquire, listen to what they're really telling you, which is that they're having a tough time with something, and find a way to help them to express that and deal with that tough time. Then they'll be like, yeah, well, you're not so bad, or yeah, that was a bit racist, you know, because they're like friends. But they need to feel safe with you, and you need to feel safe with them. Someone's got to break the chain. And I don't care where you're coming from, what angle you're coming from, we have to break the chain. This isn't just nice anymore. This is absolutely crucial to our survival. We won't survive the coming emergencies intact if we don't build this sense of human solidarity between us. And it's very hard to do because all the habits pull us the other way. And I'm going to be practicing that, like on the web and stuff. And I don't want to be pulled up when I don't do it. I'm not going to pull anyone else up. But I want to get away from this idea that some people, oh, you're nice, you like everybody. No, it's not that. I don't like everybody at all. I find a lot of things really detestable, hard, horrible, obscene. The whole society we have is obscene in many respects, because there's so much that's happening that isn't acknowledged and dealt with, that we just get by. But there's enough of the human there that life is always worthwhile. So life is still good. And that human has to grow. The human is the good stuff, and it has to grow. And that means making a real effort on my part to not only to connect with people, but to make sure that I question my own ideas in relation to them. I don't assume I'm right. I don't assume I'm better. And most of all, that I decide that no one else is going to do this. I have to do this. You have to do this. We have to do this. There isn't anybody else anymore. Resilience which makes the difference between life and death in an emergency, will have to be built by us, and we're going to have to stretch ourselves and get out of our little bubbles of identities and make genuine connections with people we feel divided from. And on that very Sunday morning kind of sermony note, I'm going to stop talking to myself on this screen and see if there's anybody out there and anyone's got any questions.
Oh, that was wonderful. Thank you, Theo. Yeah, a really inspiring start to a Sunday morning, and I was sort of lost in taking on a journey with you, and I think a lot of people were by having a look at the comments. Angela, who is up next, actually was saying she's loving this talk and she's having a little cry. Mike says such profound and moving words, very inspiring. And Kristen's got a good point, actually, and it's kind of a question that I was thinking about too. I think, you know, what you're saying about reaching out to people and understanding and you know, not immediately putting walls up between you and other people is definitely something we need to do. But how can we protect ourselves? How can we find the energy within when sometimes that is a struggle, because we've all got our own problems or concerns or other things going on in our lives. So Kristen says she really agrees that this approach is the key, but I get tired sometimes and I can't always engage with people directly because I'm out of resources. I can shift how I view people though, and I hope this makes a difference. I think that's that key, that mindset shift, that view shift. But how do we look after ourselves at the same time?
Yeah, I know exactly, Kristen. I know the same completely. I mean, obviously, me and you both do it, I know, is just step back. Sometimes even after I've said something to someone online, I don't even look, ever. I'm so scared of what's going to come back. I don't even look. I just leave it there. I think, well, okay, I don't have to deal. You don't have to engage. You know, you don't have to. And you can step back at any time and you can go completely quiet. But that's not the real issue here, is it? The real issue is how, because I'm saying that these fracture lines, as I'm thinking of them, fault lines, that they exist in all of us because we've been raised in a fractured society. So we've got these pulls. What's been so weird to me, and I've said it already, but it is so weird that I have people who are my allies on some of the struggles that I support. And now I'm like, but they're such and such. They oppose the lockdown. They think Bill Gates is the Antichrist. Come on. But then other times I'm like with them against somebody else because they're a racist. And it's just bizarre. And we've all obviously got these many different strands. So how do I deal with it when I've got those and it's just too much? And I think this is a bit, I didn't cover this. The solidarity, the first bit of solidarity we need is with each other. So I know I have that with, for instance, I think it's Kristen, I have that with you online. And I often now, I use groups a lot. I use, I mean, I'm a Facebook thing and there's lots of different platforms, obviously, but where you can go into a private with a few people and where somebody can reach out to you and say, I'm having a real problem here. Can you help? I'm just feeling overwhelmed, you know? And in the same way as you could do that online, obviously, is to do that in our lives. One of the things that I practice, and I do it through a thing called co-counseling, but anybody can do it, is call a friend and we listen to each other. I just ask them to listen. So I unload. Maybe we agree, we have a timer, we say 2 minutes. For 2 minutes, I just tell them how shit it is, how crap it was what my partner said to me or whatever it is, you know? And I rage about it and I say all the things I shouldn't say, and I can be completely politically incorrect, I can be completely unfair, whatever, or I can cry, whatever I need to do. And the other person just loves me, you know? And then we stop and then I do it for them. Or it's just thinking stuff through. I'm having a real problem with this guy, this friend of mine. He's so keen on Brexit. He's got the wrong, however many times I blah, blah, blah. And I just talk and think it through. And they give me some time. And that helps me. So first we need to find ways to build the solidarity within the groups that we already inhabit. Because often those groups too, we're doing a lot of, you know, I'll admit it. and hopefully then others will too. I'm a very vulnerable person inside, even though I'm doing this. I can go into a room and inside all kinds of things are going on. Oh, they're bigger than me. Oh, they're weaker than me. Do they like me? Did I come across all right then? Do they think that I'm a little bit unprogressive? Did I show a little bit of some kind of... Did I use the wrong word for black person then? Because it's changed, hasn't it? This is what happens to you when you're older. You're like, oh, have I got the right... is my attitude to gender correct? I can't remember anymore. Things like that, right? That's all going on. And I need to make it, we need to create a more safety for us with each other. So I need to be able to work on that with a few friends. I need to be able to say those things to friends and for them not to go, you what? You think what? Oh my God. Because although that's just friendly, actually inside, this is how we put each other down all the time. And so, yeah, I think build solidarity with close friends. Tell people when you need a hand. That's all I do.
Thank you. I think that's all absolutely, it really chimes in with what Gaynor Flynn was talking about yesterday, which is kind of taking back our expectations of other people and bringing them back inside ourselves and thinking, why are we expecting other people to behave in a certain way, and giving that sort of forgiveness at the start. But also I think having that realization that we're all thinking those things inside. You know, we're all a bundle of nerves and inconsistencies and anxieties, and even when, you know, outwardly looking everything's calm, you know, it's that swan analogy, isn't it? Underneath the surface, it's frantic paddling.
Oh yeah, yeah. Good. Yeah.
But I think it's that recognition that everybody's having that, and actually I am seeing that a bit more in the lockdown. People seem to be a little bit kinder. I don't know whether because we're peeking into everyone's lives via Zoom, and we're, you know, we haven't got all our makeup on and our sort of outward faces. We're in our homes. I think, you know, there's more realization that people are fully rounded individuals with children running in and out, or dogs or whatever, than smart suits.
Definitely. There's been an amazing, one of the good, you know, one of the positives that's come out of this is that we've experienced the humanness of everybody, even the people on the media, even those presenters. You realize they're in their pajamas and they're at home. It's just great, that bit, because it is
looking a little bit unkept.
Yeah, it is a bit of humanness emerging, and it's precious, and we need to build on it, because my worry, though, you know, I know some people are desperate, lots of good reasons why the lockdown is causing real distress for people. I understand that, and it could be economic, it could be all kinds of reasons. So I don't want to be like one of those happy dippy, even though I happen to have had a good one, because I'm on furlough in nature where I live with my daughter. It's been fine for me, I'll be honest, you know, but I know, and I've had to support other people who it's not, but there is this bit of humanness. But once it all gets going again, I'm so scared of all that getting lost. I'm so scared that we just get back into all the hustle and bustle. But we won't be, of course, because we're going to have an economic crisis. We are in one. And that's going to mean people are going to be struggling, and there's going to be struggles, and there's going to be workplace struggles. There's going to be social movements. There's going to be needs for solidarity again. But that's where this polarization can occur, because you can have big solidarity versus big vested interest, and the vested interest has the actual weaponry and the CS gas, and you end up fighting each other. You know, you see people, I've seen people on telly shouting at all those cops in armor in America. And the thing which people, I've been in experience, I've had a lot of experience with cops in my life, and the thing to realize with those riot cops in that gear is they can't hear you. You know, they're in a completely different world. They are shut up in protective clothing, and there's a voice in their earpiece. That's it, you know. So when you reach that point, you're beyond the point where you can kind of sort things out through a friendly discussion, because they're gone, you know. So, yeah, to hold on to this humanness and to bring it into, unfortunately, you know, we are going to lose sight of it a bit. It's already happened, hasn't it? As soon as the government policy started to diverge from rational behavior, and it became apparent we weren't all in one world together, and that there was a class thing going on here, you know, it became obvious we're losing some of that humanness. You know, for the first few weeks, I could actually truthfully say, well, I think Boris is doing the best he can. And although I still think he's doing the best he can, I can now say, and it's not, possibly going to be good enough, you know. So the position has changed. But
Mm.
yeah, the humanness is something to build on and to hold, like we hold with as much passion. Look, when you get black, when you realize the depth of the racism, and as a white person you begin to own it and you say, thank God, you know, so much respect. All the other issues, the difficulties of the time with the lockdown and should people break the lockdown, all of that, I know it's many-sided contradictory issue, but the fact that Black Americans took that moment to say it's actually got to end, you know, it's not like we'll have another protest and raise a little bit more of the bar. It's got to end. Racism has got to end. So that's really a fantastic moment that we've reached, and the seriousness you feel about that and the willingness to fight. You know, I will fight against racism if it comes to it. You know, I believe in non-violence as the best way, but I will defend whatever. We have to have that same passion that we have for the environment or for our children or against racism or for an abused woman against sexism. We have to have that same passion for defending the humanness of all beings. All beings have been robbed of their humanness by being raised in a competitive system. Every one of them was a child that needed to be cherished and wasn't sufficiently in many cases. So we're kind of to get as passionate. So when that person's coming at me, and this is what I try and do with the cops, when a cop is coming at me with that bar, I'm like, but I want to find the human in there. I'm passionate about, I'm not going to give up on you, mate. I am not going to give up on you. You know?
And I think, you know, it's as you said, there are so many crises and feels like really big shifting moments ahead of us and starting to happen, and that's going to challenge us even further. Like you said, the fault lines could be different on every single crisis, and trying to find your place and your solidarity and your team within those fault lines is going to be a shifting thing itself.
Yeah, but it's hard within our groups. I find this hard, to have the courage, because it's like a pattern. It's like we each have some patterns, and then which I think often arise from early experience. Like I noticed all these people who believed this kind of weird QAnon stuff, which came out during the crisis, the virus at the height of the lockdown, which was that Donald Trump was waging a secret war against the deep state, who are harvesting adrenaline from trafficked children. I don't know if you know this, but this is huge in America. Most people don't know about this. This is massive in Trump's base. It's the QAnon conspiracy theory. It's a whole thing. And people believe it. And I suddenly saw people in this country who I knew, who I've stood alongside on front lines, who were talking about Trump's, you wait and see, on Monday the news will be out, Trump's busting this. Of course, it never happened. It bollocks. But they believed it. And then I held back and I kind of felt around and asked a few things. And it became obvious to me that these were people who, I'm sorry to say it, and it may not be true of everyone who believes this, I'm not being rude, but they were people who've experienced abuse. It's very simple. It's that simple. You know, some of the people who are paranoid about the world have experienced the kind of behavior that makes you paranoid when they were children. So they're coming from a very deep, they're really hurt about this. And if I just go, oh, and they don't even know it often. People don't acknowledge, you know, our early traumas, we don't even necessarily know they're there. I know that. I've discovered a load in the last few years about what I've been acting out, which I didn't even know. I just remembered stuff and thought, oh, it's that bully at school. I'm still having that fight, you know. But yeah, people are sitting on top of that, and we got these patterns. And then we get together and we have these patterns of identity. And I know it's really important to notice where where people of different identity are oppressed and restricted. But it's also important to notice that you're not the identity. And the whole reason that it's wrong is that you shouldn't be treated as an identity. You have an equal right to every other human being. So you shouldn't be getting this special bad treatment. And it's like, what happens in every group is this other thing, which, you know, it's very, I think it's what primates do. We have to do it. It was a survival thing. What does the group think? I'll go with them. If the group moves, I move. You haven't got time to think about it. You're surviving in the wild. Group says predator, I'm off. Turns out it was a false alarm. Doesn't matter. You know, that's what monkeys do. We are still running some of that stuff. And we don't want to be the one. We're afraid. I'm afraid. I'm afraid of getting identified as a non-woke person somewhere. And it does happen. There are things where I disagree with people, and it's like, ooh, I've stepped on the wrong minefield there. And all I can ask is people have some compassion to me. Go on.
No, I was going to say, I mean, we live in a world where we're encouraged to think very simplistically, you know, black, white, yes, no, Brexit, leave, remain.
Yeah.
We live in this world of very polar opposite divisions where we've lost that grey area. And if you're in that grey area, which most people are on a lot of different issues, you know, people are trying to push you towards either edge.
Yeah.
And I think that remembering that we all are able to hold so many different more opinions than just yes or no, right or wrong. And going back to that a bit more, I think is really important, finding the middle ground.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. We're more, nobody actually fits. That's the funny thing. Nobody fits. We all kind of champion particular ideals of how people should be, and none of us fit them. And like I say, you fit them 90%, and then you find out the 10 where you didn't, and it's like really shocking, you know.
We're not,
isn't that, yeah,
focus groups, you know, we're not polls, we're so much more than that. But I think it's been I'm going to have to
it's time to wind
things up in a second, even though I could talk to you all day, and I think lots of other people could as well.
Can I just say, Angela, that we've been obviously all separated because of lockdown and that, and yet we found this way, which is amazing. In some ways it's been quite good, but it is human connection that does that, isn't it? When you know somebody as a rounded person, you go to a funeral or a wedding and you meet someone from your family, and it so happens they work in the oil industry or they're a police officer, but you don't mind because they're part of your family and you know their other sides. Do you know what I mean? It's like that. We actually have to form actual human face-to-face connections with people in order to see beyond these binaries which the online creates. Yeah, thanks very much.
Definitely, and yeah, I think it really goes back to what you were saying, sort of through your talks, that people are much more than their identity, and we're getting lots of support in the chat. So Sam says you're very inspiring. Getting your hands deep down into the murky depths of within all of us, so thank you. Christian says, thank you, we're all fractured, and it helps to be reminded and support each other, and being given permission to be as we are is so important. Thank you, Theo. So yeah, there's been an outpouring of agreement, I think, and inspired agreement with you this morning. Theo, for anyone who doesn't know you, how can we find you? How can we connect with you if people want to?
Well, I kind of got stuck at the Facebook level on social media. That works for me. So I am on Facebook and I quite like it. It suits me. It's a medium that suits me. Twitter is dangerous for me. I always say things I regret. I like Facebook, and I'm in a band called Seize the Day, and we have a website and we do songs. And